You never really get to vacation, if you will, because you don't really stop mommying.
Yeah.
And so there's that other dynamic of traveling.
Yeah, you're just parenting in a exotic location.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. You're parenting in Jamaica now instead of parenting in, Florida. You're parenting in London.
Yeah. In a lot of senses, it's actually harder. The kid is outside of their normal environment. You don't have all the resources you normally have, the comforts of home, all that. Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast.
We are two toddler boy moms that have been best friends since college, and we are here to share our unique motherhood journeys through a comparative lens.
And we all say we're not supposed to compare, right? But clearly we know that's not realistic.
Because the first few years of motherhood shook our lives and friendship like no other experience has.
And by comparing and contrasting our journeys, we've discovered the strongest threads of sisterhood yet.
We don't have all the answers, and we sure have made some missteps.
So we invite you to follow along as we do our best to nurture our friendship while making 1,000 tiny mama decisions in an unfair world.
Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast.
Today we're going to be talking about traveling with a toddler is a mother. And this is a interesting topic, I'm sure, for all the people who have had the pleasure of traveling with a toddler or toddlers. Bless those people's souls. I can't even imagine, honestly. But this specific topic was the root of a big part of the motivation of how we even evolved our current mamahood, sisterhood relationship, navigating a trip with me traveling with a toddler and my husband to visit you was motivating to our starting this podcast to kind of work through some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can start there. And I mean, there is a lot of layers to that trip and the aftermath of that trip. So I'm trying to think of a concise way to describe our trip, but we could start with just, how we planned the trip, why, and all of that. So as we all know, Jamie gave birth in the pandemic. And so for the first year of LJ's life, you guys were pretty much under lock and key. And so the first opportunity for us to come visit and meet LJ was not until he was a year and some change old. So it was December of
2021, right?
Yeah.
Because LJ was a year and a half, let's say.
Yeah.
So that means Everett was 2.5.
Right. So when Everett was only a few months old, you were able to come visit because that was right before the pandemic. And so everything was still quote unquote normal. And that was just a magical trip. But you had come by yourself and we had a lovely visit.
It was awesome.
And you got a lot of good baby snuggles. And so in my mind, this was just long overdue. And of course, I was chomping at the bit to meet LJ. And I had all of these visions of LJ and Everett being little besties. And do you remember I bought matching outfits?
Of course I do.
I was so excited and so ready to descend upon West Palm Beach and the Howe compound. And we were just going to live it up for a week. And I just was excited to kind of help out and just see how you were navigating having a little dude running around the house. And yeah, so let me stop there. That was my reason for the trip. And we were coming as a family. So Brett and I and Everett, we had traveled before with Everett as what I would call a baby. But this was kind of our first air travel, time zone travel with a full-blown toddler.
And meanwhile, we on our Howe side are ecstatic. Had it not been for the pandemic, we would have been seeing each other. That would have happened. So we're excited that Peavy and Brett are coming. Everett's going to be best friends with LJ. LJ's going to be best friends with Everett. They're going to just kind of take the torch and just run with it, and all the things. And so we were equally as excited. John and Brett have a bromance. So, I mean, and I love me some Brett. So all of us were going to have this beautiful, our kids are going to, hold hands and skip down the street and shit. And it's going to be a beautiful trip.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all stressed out by the end of the trip.
By the end of the trip, yes, very stressed, very stressed. I will say retrospectively, and this is, I hope, helpful for most trips that you take with a toddler, is that we were naive, both families were naive in the fact that even though I feel like, if you named out like the quote unquote itinerary of what we did throughout the week, it wasn't a lot, but I still think we tried to do too much. We even went to Miami at the end of the trip. That was probably totally unnecessary and added more stress. And yeah. So anyway, that's like an overarching hot tip. Don't plan too much because nothing is going to go as you plan. And if it does, amazing.
Take that win.
But yeah, so we had a horrible flight over. Do you remember us explaining to you what the flight was like?
Oh, I felt like I was on the flight with you all, just living vicariously through you both and your story. So care to share? Because that was a hell of a flight for y'all.
Yeah. So I will just say, leading up to this point, Everett had been in preschool. So he was used to being around kids and being social and starting to figure out the whole sharing and toddler conflicts and all that stuff. But anyway, he was doing well up to this point. Some things that I would still say are quote unquote normal for toddlers, like impulse control problems, emotional regulation problems, their brains are just starting to develop. So they don't have those executive functioning skills at all. So anytime something messes with them, their homeostasis, they're going to do something to try to fight, flight, freeze, or fib, I guess I just learned is another one. He was definitely not advanced enough to be fibbing at that point. But Everett's mode is always fight, always, even to this day. And we'll see where that goes. But whenever he gets, when he's overstimulated or, things are just out of his control, he is in fight. And we learned on the plane just how strong that reaction for him is. And he had what we now can look back on and name. He had his first night terror on the plane. And so let me just take a sidestep in explaining. And this is not a medical explanation or a clinical explanation, but just from my own experience with parenting a child that had severe night terrors. Nightmares are different. Nightmares are anyone or a child has a bad dream. They wake up, they're upset, they might cry or be scared or scream or whatever, but you can console them and you can, they are awake and they can tell you what happened. They might need more attention, want to come in your bed or whatever, but that's a nightmare. A night terror is more in the family of sleepwalking, sleep talking, where even if your eyes are wide open, you're not awake. You're not fully conscious. So you're in whatever your mental state is inside of whatever is the dream that is occurring in your head as you're asleep. So a lot of times night terrors can be accompanied with walking and talking. A lot of kids who have night terrors seem like they're awake because they're screaming at the top of their lungs. They're being terrorized in this dream. And they are trying to protect themselves in whatever bad dream they're in. So a lot of times they're hitting, flailing around. They tell you don't try to wake the child because that can actually just make it worse because they feel even more threatened by this unknown thing that's occurring at the same time as the bad dream. So it kind of all blurs together for them. Oh, and they can last a long time. They can last minutes to hours. And a lot of kids start having them around 2, and then they grow out of them around, 3 or 4, but some kids can have them through age 12. And some people never grow out of them, the unlucky ones, and they have them their whole lives. So if you know an adult that has night terrors, it's a horrible thing to think about having to live with. Anyway, so this was the first time that Everett had a night terror, but at the time we did not know that that's what it was. And there's a lot of triggers for night terrors. We didn't know them at the time, of course, because we were just starting to observe these. But being overtired, being like woken up when they're in a deep sleep, too much like screen time right before they go to sleep. Like there's a bunch, they're all, of course, individual too. So if you had a kid with a night terror, you would be able to learn their triggers and like help manage them and avoid them with that, which is what we ended up doing. But again, in this moment, we had no idea. I don't remember how the beginning flights went, but the very last flight, we were boarding our last flight and we thought he was asleep when we were getting on the plane. And we thought for sure he would fall asleep as we were taking off because it was dark and all the motion and everything. And he basically looked wide awake and he went into a night terror and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. He was hitting anything and anyone, Brett and I, the seats. He was kicking the same way. He was crying. And we had never had like a quote unquote tantrum like this. We thought he was having a tantrum and we were like, what the holy hell is going on? Like, this is next level. I was trying to restrain him, like a kind of feeling like, oh, maybe if I'm like a straitjacket or like a weighted blanket kind of thing, like maybe he just needs to feel that intense like wrap around. That just made it worse. We tried everything. And this woman behind us, bless her soul, remember this? She was flying with her like 8-year-old daughter. And of course, the 8-year-old is being this wonderful, sweet, calm little child. And the woman, as Everett literally is like a possessed animal on our laps, like flying. I mean, I can't even imagine what this looked like from behind. And she like peeks through the seats and she was like, does he need a snack? We have some snacks. And you can imagine my stress and anxiety level at this point and how I am just trying to keep my own shit together at this point. And I turned around and I was like, you don't think we brought snacks? This is not about snacks. I was like, went into full bitch mode. And I feel bad about that now. Whoever that woman was, thank you for trying to help. And poor Brett is like mortified at any conflict. So he was like, oh no, thank you so much. Oh yeah, we have some snacks. He's like, she's just trying to help. I'm like, I was like dying inside.
Sorry.
And no, it was horrible. And it kept going. And literally you could have heard a fucking pin drop on that plane. Everyone went dead silent and was just like, we all just need to get through this. It was what they must have thought he had like some crazy problem. And at that point I did too. I was like, uh-oh, is this like revealing something that we didn't know was there? And finally, I don't know why we didn't, I swear it was like 30 minutes into this. I don't know why we didn't think about this before, but pitch black in the airplane. But Brett pulled out his phone and started looking at photos of like people he knew, himself. And it snapped it out of him. Like he came to, and he was finally like with us with his eyeballs. And then he finally just collapsed and fell asleep after that. And he was out for the rest of the flight. But I was like literally holding him on my arms, tears streaming down my face. I was mortified. I was just embarrassed, but also like, what the hell just happened? We had no way of helping him. We felt helpless and totally out of control. And again, like fear around like, what the hell was that? Is that going to happen again? So this is how our trip started. And we literally landed right at your house and we told you that whole thing, probably in greater detail. I'm sure I blocked some shit out. And then I'm sure you guys were like, holy shit, what is this kid all about?
I honestly could imagine. I've been on a flight because at this point, keep in mind, we hadn't traveled with, well, no, we had traveled with LJ, but he was still little. But being on a flight with other parents that are, trying to maintain calm with their children, it's stressful. And so you always feel, most of us empathize with the parents. So no, we weren't thinking like, what the hell is up with this kid? We were just thinking like, that sounds like a horrible experience. And you have to be tired and let's get a drink, even though it's 1:00.
Oh yeah. We were just strung out. Fortunately, no one was openly critical to us. I'm sure they felt horrible for us. So I do appreciate that. I've definitely been on flights since where that has not been the case. And fortunately, that was the only like full on night terror that we've ever had on an airplane. But that was crazy. So that's how the trip started. And then moving forward, like through the week, I thought that like most of the interactions that we all had and that Everett had, like to me, were very normal and not concerning or alarming. But I think I was like feeling the energy from you and John that things were not okay, especially when they're like, you know, there's LJ, all LJ's toys are there. Of course, it's his house. And Everett's never been there. And he was like, this is amazing. And honestly, he hadn't really played with too many kids outside of his preschool either, you know, but he, you know, wanted to have everything. And anytime he would, no, toddlers are good sharers. They're not like, excuse me, could I please borrow that toy? You know, so he's like ripping stuff out of LJ's hands. And probably through the course of the week, he pushed or hit LJ like 5 times. And to me, I was like, well, that's not too bad. But you guys were like, what the hell? Get your hands off my child. You do not hit, push any of those things in under this roof. And I remember like John stepping in a few times, not only with LJ and Everett's interactions, but just with other things, you know, stepping in and trying to set Everett straight and set a boundary, which I don't mind. I still think that that's totally appropriate when you're in someone else's house or, you know, wherever you are. Like kids need to learn that different rules apply in different places and they still have to respect those and know those. But this is the first time that we had been in an environment with like people who we would consider our closest friends and loved ones and family, where I felt like they don't like my kid and they think we're bad parents. I could tell as the week went on, you guys were like shielding LJ from Everett and trying to keep him separate. In my head, I was like, well, this is the opposite of what we would want to do if we want to socialize them and get them to interact and like figure it out themselves, because parents can't like step in and figure it out for them, you know? I don't think it was during that week, but maybe in the aftermath of getting home and like trying to process everything, I had to just remind myself, like, LJ was a COVID baby and he was not in school at that point. Like, he had barely been around other kids, especially not a kid that is older than him and that has been in that social situation day after day and that is used to kind of like working it out with the other kids and figuring out how to share and address conflicts and stuff. We haven't even gotten to the potty training part. I'll let you do that one. Because that was another wrench that we threw in, is that we were also in the transition of potty training Everett through all of this. And so we wanted to keep up with the potty training while we were traveling. So anyway, that was a lot to throw out there initially. So that was our take on how things kind of started out with our wonderful trip.
I ain't gonna lie. It was the complete opposite of what all of us, I imagined, what it was going to be like. I don't even know how to unpack it. I mean, there was so much there. I think there were a couple things at play. One is, of course, Mama Bear, because LJ, was born during the pandemic. He hadn't been around a lot of other little kids. And I think that I've been in other interactions with other kids. And so I wasn't used to a lot of I know kids and toddlers will push and they want to do all these things and they want to share. But it was different through my lens because I had never experienced LJ being shoved or hit and it wasn't, in my opinion, always about sharing. There were just times when it was just like, whoa, I didn't even see that coming. Like the kid just trying to walk in his own damn house, you know? I think it was that coupled with, but this will all kind of even out. Like it'll all normalize and, I don't want this to be weird. So we're going to try to move through it. So I had my lens, my experience as a mom, watching her kid being uncomfortable in his own space, navigating John, who has his perceptions and perspectives of what should be okay, what should not be okay. And if you all know John, he is very vocal, but he also has his cultural norms. I have my cultural norms. So there were a lot of things at play. And still trying to be open and protective of you, Peeve, because I knew you were still a new mom, and we're still new moms, hell, but a new mom and trying to navigate all that. So there was a lot going on in my brain. I'm like, I'm angry. because I don't like how this is going. I don't like the way that LJ is being treated. I am judging because I feel like Everett may need to be, hemmed up a little bit more just to be like, stop it. Don't do that. Because I know in the black household, we would have been like, you need to sit down. But that's cultural. Some of that is cultural, not every black household. Let me just say that. So there was judgment. There was awareness. But I can tell you that my capacity to have that awareness is bigger now that LJ is older and he has been around, more kids. He hasn't been in a situation like this again since then. So I think there was a lot at play there. And also, I'm mindful as a mom, and more so now, of not imposing what I think should happen onto someone else, because I wouldn't want someone to impose onto me, especially now, like, of how they think I should parent LJ. So there were a lot of things at play during this visit. Yeah, it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to address this, though, Pete, because I don't think I've ever heard you verbalize that you felt like we didn't like your kid. You just said a second ago, you're like, whoa, I feel like these people are like, family, but I feel like in this moment they don't like my kid and they're miserable. So I've never heard you articulate your feeling like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that a lot in the moment, not just with you, not just in that moment with you, but in my family's home. I felt that from my actual blood family. Like the way that the interactions are happening in that moment, that's like your gut reaction, like, oh shit, they don't like my kid. They don't like appreciate all the good things about him. All they're seeing is the bad things and the challenging moments, and they're not approaching him with love first. They're judging his actions or his like inability to regulate or communicate effectively, judging our parenting. So I just know that that is not true, obviously. Even in that moment, when I'm like rationalizing things, I know that that's not the case. I know you love us and Everett. But I was saying that because in those moments, that's how you feel initially. Like you just feel so beat down, like coming at you from all angles with the emotions. And like I said, we're coming off the heels of this like terrible airplane ride.
Yeah.
So
I just
was
wanted to acknowledge that.
Hot mess. Yeah, no, I know that that's not true. But I just wanted to be honest in telling the story that that's how I felt in those exact moments when you're just feeling like the criticisms are coming and not necessarily just like embracing the whole kid, the whole family kind of thing.
The whole scenario. And thank you for that, because I think there was something else that you had mentioned, maybe not in what you just shared now, but I know in the moment that at home, Santa Barbara home, if someone's child is like acting up or acting out, that the mom groups that you're a part of, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is paraphrasing from 3 years ago, that the mom groups that you're a part of tend to rally around the mom and saying, it's okay, this is normal behavior, like that's fine. And I think you mentioned that in our interaction, you didn't feel that same sense of support because I wasn't like, it's okay, it's normal. And I've thought about that over the years too. And I do think some of that, which is another episode we'll talk into, is about cultural rooting, and what our norms are and what we perceive to be normal, and, and it structures how we interact with people that share those same norms or they may not. Because I remember in that moment I was thinking, because in my cultural lens, and again, not culture or color, culture, just family norms. It's, yes, we protect the mom, but we also want to make sure that we don't normalize every behavior by just saying that they're 2 or they're 3 or they're 4. So we don't normalize every part. It's just, yes, this is normal behavior and we need to check this before it turns into a bigger thing. So I think some of that was at play too, because in that moment, I remember feeling judged also, because I'm like, well, she's now telling me that my reaction to how she's feeling isn't the norm for her because of this quote unquote normal group of women that she associates with, normalizing that experience. And that experience looks and feels differently to me. I say all that to say there were so many things at play. Peavy and I have never had a situation in our long sisterhood, and I will speak for me, where we felt like there was like the large elephant in the room. Like there was so much tension between everybody, but we still couldn't figure out how to address it fully. And I imagine that's because we were still being protective of each other and protective of our respective families. You know, everybody's feeling judged. Everybody's feeling like this was a bad idea. We shouldn't have done all those things. But then there's so much love there too. This was the first time I remember, I'm sure you had similar conversations with Brett. I had conversations with John, like, I don't know how to navigate this because I want to be protective of my child and I want to be protective of my sister and I want to be protective of her family so they don't feel like they can't ever come back. I want to feel comfortable saying y'all can come back. So it was all of those things at play.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And your description of that memory is mostly accurate. And I think that it was my roundabout, indirect, passive way of asking for support from you. All of what you said is not wrong. And that's truly was my experience, that in that state, that little stage of our parenting life, when these things would come up at preschool or at the playground or whatever, and I did reach out, you know, or vice versa, like whoever reached out in our little mama support group, the whole purpose of that group is to support each other as moms. So the whole premise of that whole group is not necessarily to focus on the kids, because everyone, as we've talked about, all of society, all of everybody, as soon as that baby pops out, it's all about the baby and the mom can go take a hike. So I think that is like a microcosm of trying to change that experience for our little group that has connected. So you're not wrong in that I did get that level of more mama-centric support from that group. And I agree with you, and Brett would 1,000 times agree with you, that explaining all these things away by just saying, oh, he's 2, he's 3, he's 4, is not a good approach or way to parent, because then the kid is running the show. I will say that right now, parents have never had so many resources and bits of information coming at them at every angle about how to parent and about how to break generational norms if they want to with parenting, like how you discipline, how you set consequences and boundaries. What you were kind of experiencing are very like dedicated attempts to do that. So part of that is recognizing what is normal behavior and not just toddlers have to be perfect all the time, because it's impossible. That's an unfair expectation. We have to help him manage his emotions. Then, because he is so verbal and he is so like emotionally aware, we can talk about what happened, what was not right about that, how he handled it or wasn't right about the situation, what could we do differently next time? And then we can also like prep him in advance of those situations. So like now we would approach traveling to visit you guys or whoever much differently. Like we would be prepping ourselves and him a lot in advance, but we were like totally naive. We didn't realize that would have been an important element to having a happy, successful trip. Anyway, that was a long response to say, you're not wrong in that memory of kind of how I was passive aggressively like saying, can you, like show me support too? Because I know you were trying to not say anything directly to me because you didn't want to hurt my feelings. But I could tell because of your energy and your actions and John's energy. I don't doubt it. Yeah, we could totally tell. So I was just kind of sharing like, oh, this other experience I have. Granted, we're not living in these people's houses for a week, right, with their child either.
I mean, I think this is also therapeutic for us just to be able to like talk it through, because there were so many things at play. And now we know, okay, next time we get our families together to travel, like there's stuff that we can both do on our respective ends. But it is funny hearing you talk about like finding that dynamic with Everett, because I feel like John and I are in that now, and that John is very direct and he'd be like, that's enough, LJ. All right, sit down. It's time to do this. I am more of the, okay, come on, Munchkin. All right, let's go. All right, let's go. Okay, LJ, and so it's like trying to rationalize it. So I think to your point, every couple or single parent, most parents are in that push-pull dynamic of where's the soft spot or the safe zone, I guess I should say. I want to discipline, yes. And I want to allow my child to be a child and to learn from his or her mistakes and like to figure it out on their own. And so it's where do you find the happy medium between the two, as if that really exists? And then how do you also allow both parents to infuse their cultural norms into their parenting so that I'm not coming over the top with John, which I have to work on, saying, that's too harsh. It's too harsh. And then he's looking at me like, well, bitch, you're not saying enough. So you need to say something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all have those dynamics. I can appreciate it now more that LJ is almost around this age now where he is exercising his no. His no game is real. So he's exercising and establishing his own boundaries. And you talked about the potty training while you're traveling. That was another nightmare. We may spare all those details, but that added to the hot mess of the dynamic for the week.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my lens was different then.
Yeah, your lens was different because you guys hadn't even thought about trying to potty train yet. And I remember you saying, well, we will not take a diaper off LJ until he is 100% fully potty trained. And I was like, whoa, yeah, that's definitely a different approach than we have right now. And I probably should have had that information before I showed up on your doorstep with this kid that's like running around naked and peeing in the bushes. Yeah. So that's another, I would say, like, tip on traveling with a toddler is don't go into these situations without all the information that you could have. I think because we're so close and comfortable with each other and we've slept on each other's couches, whatever, like it's just not the same when you're traveling with a kid now or when you're visiting someone with a kid. You need to just kind of lay it all out there, especially if you're going through something big like potty training. Like that's on us that we didn't, and granted we were just naive, but it wasn't intentional. But now knowing what I know, I would have said, hey, we're potty training. Like, how do you guys feel about this happening at your house for a week? This is the approach we're taking. He's not wearing a diaper.
He ain't even wearing pants. Not just a diaper. That joker ain't wearing any pants.
Well, this is like a cultural thing. I don't even know if you want to say, the way you define culture, which I like, which is like, how any sort of family or unit defines culture, not necessarily ethnicity.
Right.
I was the same when I was a child, and Everett's the same. Like the kid's just been naked since he was born. I mean, you've seen all the pictures I've sent. He just is a naked child. He's wild and free and just roaming the earth. And I was the same when I was a kid. And that's why everyone's like, he is your child. Apple fell from not far from the tree. And so to me, that is completely normal. Like, I don't even think twice about it. And you're definitely not the only people that makes uncomfortable.
Well, let me be clear. It doesn't make me uncomfortable in that I've seen many nudes of Everett running around. I mean, they called me Naked Jaybird in college, for God's sake. So, I mean, I'm very comfortable around nudity. I think as part of the prep is making sure that both parties are aware. Like LJ at home, when it's the two of us and John and I, he doesn't have any pants on. He don't have any clothes on. He's a free bird at home. But I think the cultural norm is, for me and John specifically, is when he's at someone else's house, we are not going to let him run around with his little butt out because we don't know how anybody else will receive that. And we're raising a little black boy, and I think there are different norms there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are different ways we have to parent because what may be quote unquote acceptable for a little blonde haired boy running around doing will be perceived completely differently from a little black boy running around doing it. So we have all of those things at play as well. We're not uncomfortable with nudity, you and me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have to be mindful that someone else's house with other house rules, that those need to be taken into consideration. And that's partly on me too, because I should have said, hey, I know John as a man, and with his cultural norms, he's not going to want a little naked kid running around the house. Like, we'll at least need to put some drawers on the little boy.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't even think about that because you and I have always just been like, nah. So I think it's, like you said, having those conversations beforehand so that it doesn't exacerbate any issues that are already.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, like even throughout the week, I just didn't let my mind and heart go there. But I did, like the whole like race thing did not even come into my brain until like it was shortly before we were going to the airport. And because I had like a little breakdown earlier that day. I finally kind of like reached my max, and I felt like the whole week we were like, Everett was the bad kid. We were defending LJ and like, safeguarding him because Everett was the aggressor. Like every single interaction, Everett was the aggressor. He was a year older. And LJ was just like, I've never even had a kid come over to my house. And this kid is like pulling all these toys out of my hand and shoving me as I walk by. So we were all like disciplining Everett, shielding LJ. And finally, by the last interaction, I was just like, okay, we also need to recognize this kid's 2.5. Okay. Like give him a little grace too. Like he can feel energy too. So I felt like he knows he's being watched by all angles by the time we were getting ready to leave. And he was definitely like starting to play that role. And funny enough, I've seen this with a lot of kids in preschool where they get kind of pigeonholed into this role and it exasperates the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They change their environment. They move preschools, whatever. Brand new kid. This happened to Everett too. Brand new kid. It's like they just sometimes everybody needs a little grace. Anyway, so I kind of had this breaking moment where I tried to defend Everett in the moment. Like, okay, he's only 2.5. You know, he's gonna make mistakes and we got to just like let a kid make a mistake. And then that's when you were like, whoa, 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 like we got to talk about this before you leave. So I really appreciated that we sat down and just, I mean, we could have had a much longer conversation to address it, but that is when you both brought up like, our little black boy cannot go pee in the bushes. He cannot just drop his pants and pee in the bushes, potty training or not. You know, our kid can't go out of the house with crazy looking hair that hasn't been brushed in 3 days. You know, and you started listing these things. And I was like, I had not allowed myself to go there to even like try to have those be some of the reasons for the tension. And so when we left, like I just thought a lot about that on the plane ride home, which thankfully was a breeze. We earned that. And then like in the weeks to follow, like I really just had to take a step back and think about that. And it made me really, really sad that because as we've shared, like this has never been an issue for our friendship and our experiences as we've had these parallel lives. And then I started thinking, well, damn, this is not only just a 2.5-year-old coming in, pushing around a 1.5-year-old. This is a white male coming in, pushing around a black male in his own home.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we talked about this like several times on the phone, leading up to like kind of repairing stuff, it wasn't until we were actually sitting together months later when you had come out to LA for work that we, you know, we started rehashing all this, trying to do more repair. And I was like, was this about race? And you were like, yes.
Not solely, but
right. But that was
a
an
big part.
element that we hadn't really, I didn't allow myself to kind of think about as the week was unfolding. But I had, like I said, thought about it a lot since then. And then I think that's when we were like really boohoo crying because it just sucked that was, it's a part of it and you can't escape it. You can't ignore it. You can't sweep it under the rug. And that's another thing, you know, that I think as you're prepping to go travel with your toddler, you need to think about all of those elements, not just, you know, the logistics and stuff, but it's like all of those cultural considerations.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that also came up when we were talking about like, and this could also just be me. This is not race, although I imagine I could speak for 80% of the black folk that I know. But if we were eating Cheerios outside, and remember the Cheerios are falling on the ground, and LJ was looking like he was going to pick them up. I'm like, don't you pick that up, put that in your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, ow, you and Brett both. Like, it's just dirt. You know, it's fine. Let him put it in his mouth. And one of you made the comment like, yeah, we've been in restaurants when he's been on the ground and he's like, you know, crawling on the people's tables. And I was like, So let my little black son be on the ground, scrounging for food, even though he's well fed, you know, or even if that's the perception, it would be label, 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 label.
Mm-hmm.
When the cute, precocious white kid does it, it's like, oh, he's just being a kid. Oh, that's normal behavior. And so to your point, I think that in addition to our parenting styles, in addition to our family dynamics, in addition to our spouse dynamics, in addition to our children's dynamics, there's also this cultural dynamic of, yes, we can give kids grace. And this is just me speaking from my black child. I can give LJ grace all day. I give him a lot of grace because he is an awesome little kid and he's now stepping into his strong emotions. And with us giving grace, I also have to be mindful of, we have to start instilling in him now a sense of boundaries and expectations, because we have to start letting him understand now that when you're hanging out, if you have some white friends down the road and you're hanging out with your white friends, you cannot do the same thing that Billy and them are doing, because Billy and them are going to get a pat on the wrist. And so it's sad in that, like, to your point, yeah, it's sad that we have to have those different conversations, but it's a reality. And I think I have more of that appreciation for John's lens, because I have this dynamic of nurture him. I need to nurture him. He's fine. Like, he's doing this. And yes, I know he said no 40 times, but he don't really mean it. He's just trying to get into it. John's like, because I'm raising a Black man. And so, yes, he's a toddler. Yes. But there's only so much grace I can give him when I'm saying we need to do this, because if he doesn't learn that at home and he's out in the real world, it's going to be a completely different treatment than Everett.
It's just not an even playing field.
Which is why we need to have more of these conversations as mothers, yes, and then recognizing the intersectionality of our respective identities, because we're both mothers, and so we may have similarities there, of course, but then you add in the other parts of our identity that lends itself to a different experience. So your experience as a mother is one thing. Your experience as a white mother is one thing. Your experience as a white mother in Santa Barbara is a different experience. Your experience as a white mother in Santa Barbara within a socioeconomic group is going to have a different experience than even white mom in New York in a different socioeconomic group. Two different experiences because of their respective identities. So I think that's the other thing. It's just, like you said, just being mindful of all these dynamics when you're traveling, because it's not just about getting the kid there. Hopefully no night terrors on the plane. Or like my child who takes off, who's fast, running down the tarmac, and you got to get him before, he's cutting in line for everybody. We have those logistic things, yes. But then there's the cultural piece of wherever you are going. And then I add to it, and then as a mom, my lens, you're on vacation to vacation, if you will. But you never really get to vacation, if you will, because you don't really stop mommying.
Yeah.
And so there's that other dynamic of traveling.
Yeah, you're just parenting in a exotic location.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're parenting in Jamaica now instead of parenting in, Florida. You're parenting in London.
Yeah. In a lot of senses, it's actually harder because the kid is outside of their normal environment. You don't have all the resources you normally have, the comforts of home, all that. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about that initial trip, but we've both taken many trips with our toddlers since then.
Yeah.
Do you want to share any memories that are coming up for you in recent trips, things that were just like lines you had to draw and stick to that you didn't want to, but you had to, or support that you thought you were going to get during the trip that you didn't, that kind of stuff?
Ooh, I will say an additional lesson learned from traveling with the toddler is to be fluid. I was very much scheduled. You nap during a certain time. You eat during a certain time. He has to go down for his nap because he's going to be cranky. He needs to eat at a certain time because he's going to be cranky. And then you travel somewhere and you recognize that, like, the calendar doesn't mean a damn thing. Like, you have to be fluid in the way that you're parenting your child. I mean, that even speaks when I go visit my parents, right? Because I'm like, Ma, LJ's got to be down for his nap between 1:35 and 2:48. And she's like, that's nice. Well, we're at Chuck E. Cheese. So if he gets home at 4, he'll just take a nap then. I'm like, and I'm being facetious, but it's that, right? It's like you have to be fluid in that. And especially when you have family members or friends helping out, you can't expect them to stop living their lives while they're also helping you. So I would say that I learned. I had mentioned this to PV also, speaking about being aware of cultural differences when you travel, because I'd shared that when we were in Jamaica, we took LJ to Jamaica last Christmas to meet his family. And he was all off his schedule. Not on the plane, he flies well. But he was doing a lot of crying the first couple of days, a lot of throwing himself on the ground the first couple of days. And that mommy in you is like, but no, he's a really good kid. He's a really fun kid. You're just seeing this hot mess right now. But he's a really fun kid. So you find yourself trying to like justify certain things that'll let people know like, no, it's okay. This is not his normal, right? And it's recognizing that, no, that is his normal for right now. He's in a different environment. He's not on the same sleep schedule. He's not eating as much as he normally would because he's not sitting down long enough to eat. But I also mentioned that culturally it was different in Jamaica specifically because And I loved this. LJ's fast. I keep saying that. So when we were at the resort, if LJ wanted to take off running, the Joker would just take off running. Like, bam. Like, he wanted to go see the koi fish and he was off.
Mm-hmm.
In the States, I feel like people are less reluctant to touch your child. They're like, mm-mm. Like, I see the kid running rogue. I can't help you.
Or they'd be like, whose kid is that?
Right, exactly. By. Yeah, and then you see my little thick butt trying to run behind them or John's. I appreciate it in Jamaica, and it wasn't just the Jamaican peoples. Whoever's at this resort, they were quick to step in. If LJ took off running and I couldn't get them fast enough, someone inevitably would put their hand out, their arm out, scoop them up, and say, it's okay, we got him. And it was just a different vibe. And so I think that's what I've also learned. I'm speaking culturally again, that you also don't have to, but it's probably best to immerse yourself in the culture where you're traveling. Culture also being in different states of the U.S. It doesn't have to be internationally. And that was a unique experience that I appreciated, because then I felt like everybody was helping with LJ. And it wasn't just on John and me. And there were times when I felt like the majority of the parenting was on me, mm-hmm. and that I couldn't take time off.
Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, that's one thing to really think through in advance. Okay, I know this is going to be a really taxing trip, especially for me. How do I build in these little moments or extended moments that I can get a breather? You know, like someone can watch the kid, or we just all go to bed early one night, or we skip this one thing because we just don't have it in us or whatever. And I will add to what you're saying about, like, a lot of times the parenting load is heaviest on the mom while traveling, or whoever the primary parent is. You know, it doesn't really matter the gender, I guess. Mm-hmm. But making the tough parenting calls while traveling, because, and maybe this is just our family, but in our experience, Brett is a lot more concerned about not, like, rocking the boat or not being like the cause of things to not go as planned. So I have tons of examples of when the group wants to go out to dinner, of course, way too close to the bedtime or even past the bedtime. And instead of saying that doesn't work for us, you're going to get, this kid has been like on the beach all day, go, go, go. And this is just setting us all up for failure. He will just go with the flow, not say anything, and just go ahead and put our family in that situation. So through the whole dinner, I'm keeping the kid calm or occupied, or sometimes I just pull the plug and I say, you stay, you have a good time. I'm taking what this kid needs right now is to not be continually stimulated. He needs to go to sleep. He needs to eat a meal. I know if he sits in this environment, he's not going to eat. He's going to continue to be hangry. You know, like, you have to make those tough calls. And I know you just had to do this on one of your trips. You were out to dinner with a girlfriend and you're like, this is not working.
LJ was showing out.
Yeah.
It's like, we got to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I feel like, I mean, at least for our family, those tough in the moment decisions, or even stepping in when someone else is not treating your kid the way that you think they should be treated in that moment, you feel like, at least I do, as that mama bear, like, I have to step in and say, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I know this is not going to work and you're just going to be making this situation worse in this moment. Mm-hmm. I've had to so many times separate Everett from what's happening to address him, make sure he's okay, make sure I'm okay before we re-engage. Or sometimes we don't re-engage right that moment. So anyway, those are things that inevitably come up. And I don't know that those things can be avoided, but definitely talking with your partner, your co-parent, about how to handle those situations. If you can avoid being in those situations, do, but a lot of times you can't. But one way, and this is so hard, this is like a suggestion I'm going to say, but I definitely 9 times out of 10 don't do, is having space for your family. So when we're visiting family or good friends, like, we just want to stay with them, or we want them to stay with us. Oh my gosh, this happened to us where we were hosting some friends over New Year's, and it was another, like, disaster visit, like what we had with you, in a different way. Mm-hmm. But again, Everett was the aggressor and sort of like perceived as the root of the problem. It actually was a lot worse.
I remember you telling me about
what happened with our situation. Like, Everett truly was a nightmare. So I didn't blame this family at all, but they left our house early and they stayed somewhere else. And it made me so sad, but I would have done the same thing. They definitely did the right thing. And it's just sort of reinforced my suggestion is if you can afford to have a hotel, if you can afford to like have your own space, even though it might hurt not to get that like quality time, or the kids are in bed and you guys get to hang out after hours, like all of those are awesome. But sometimes you just need an escape and you need to like have that quiet space, which is hard to get even when you're visiting family.
I will tell you that we are sticklers of that. The only people that we stay with when we travel are the Beals. Outside of that, though, Peeve, when we go places, we tend to, exactly what you said, get our own space, get an Airbnb and get our own space. Because I remember, I think this came up with John's side of the family, and they were like, well, you have all this family here in Jamaica. Why don't you guys just stay with us? And John's like, we appreciate that, but we also know that we, need our own space, and not just need it, we want our own space, because we also don't want to be like on the hook if our child is up early or up late, or he's crying, or he's out of the bed and he's walking around, or he wakes the house up. It's also all of those things. Or what if I just want to lay in the bed till, well, we know that ain't gonna happen. I was gonna say till even 9 o'clock. But yeah, I'm all about having our own space, except for the Beals. They're the only people that we stay with for that reason. We need our own space to manage.
Yeah, that's an interesting framing, like that you don't want to impose on people. I need to do a better job of realizing that not everybody has the same mindset as me. Like the more the merrier, and you're not imposing, and I want to see the good, bad, and the ugly, and I want to help. And I mean, this has come up when I visited my family. I feel like inevitably Everett is sick, or has been, like through the toddler years. He's always sick when we're traveling. Ear infection, double ear infection, hand, foot, and mouth disease. And I find myself, especially when visiting family, if they don't wake up early to spend time with Everett when he's at his best. Of course, all kids are at their best in the morning. When they don't step in, when they see like you're frazzled because you haven't slept in days because this kid is sick and you're not in your own bed and all these things are different, they don't step in and say, why don't you go take a nap? I'm going to, I'll take him to the library or whatever. I remember one time Everett had hand, foot, and mouth disease, and we were staying with my family, and there was like all these activities going on and all these people coming in and out of the house, and we just had nowhere to go. And Everett was still napping. And even if he was healthy, he would have never been able to nap in that environment. But he was really sick. I drove him around every single day for as long as it would take him to fall asleep and as long as he would sleep. And I was like, is this my life right now? This is my life, day after day. I'm just driving this kid around so he can get some sleep. In my mind, I was like upset that I was in that situation, but I am appreciating the perspective you're giving me. Is like, those are not fair expectations to have, even if they are family hosting you. So yeah, just having your own space. Like had we been in a hotel room dealing with all that on our own, those expectations wouldn't even come up to the surface for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only reason why we say like we will always crash as long as we can with the Beals is because I will give my parents that. Like if I need some sleep, my mom will be like, that's fine. We'll take LJ to go get French fries and we'll go to the library and we'll hang out, and that's fine. And I'm going to say this, and I know people will take it for what I mean, hopefully. I don't feel like I'm imposing on my parents because I know that they have seen the good, bad, the ugly with me for the last 43 almost years. And they've seen the good and the bad, the ugly with LJ. And so they create a very safe space for us to be able to show up authentically. So I don't feel like I need to be guarded there. Even with extended family, I would still feel like who love me and who love LJ, but I'm mindful of everybody. That doesn't also mean that everybody needs to love every moment of you all being here either. They may want to sleep in without they're past that toddler stage. They may not want to hear a kid hollering because his grapes are cut the wrong way. Their kids are older. So I'd rather just say, you know what? When it's time for us to need some space or to even give you some of your space back, we'll just stay in a hotel room. We'll come over, we'll kick it. LJ needs to take a nap. Fine. When I went to go visit Kali when we were home, it's like, I'm bringing LJ, but if we're going to do our little dances and hang out, but when it's time for nap time, it's time to nap. She was like, cool. We hung out. It was time for nap time. We put LJ down in the basement. We were mindful of not being too loud while he was asleep. And we were still able to kick it. But I also was like, if we want to have any fun, we need to make sure the Joker goes to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
All that to say, I guess, I have been more and more aware of, and John's always been aware of the need for his personal space when we travel. I'm becoming more and more aware of that.
Yeah, me too. I'm on the becoming more and more aware. And I think you just kind of hit this home for me that you can't have it both ways. You know, like you can't expect to have all that space and support and then get upset if you don't have it, if you're all up in someone's business. Like you can't expect them to be in it to win it with you every moment of every day because you're staying in their house, whether they're your close family member or not, and also feel supported. And you just can't have it all those ways. I think it's just safer to have your own space and then make sure your kid gets the rest that he or she needs, that you get the rest that you need, the meals that you need, so that when the moments that you do share with them, even though they are fewer, they might be more enjoyable. And you're not like disappointed because whoever is not meeting your expectation for engaging. At least that's my problem right now.
100%. Like when we come to visit in Santa Barbara, we would probably stay at a hotel. We'd say, okay, that way we have space. You guys have space. We can still kick it. And then, I mean, I say that now. We may be like, nah, never mind. But I know John, he would be like, I'd want my own space. That's what he likes. And it would have nothing to do, and I think we had to articulate this, has nothing to do with the fact that we don't want to kick it with the people we're there to visit. We're just mindful that it's a mutually beneficial decision for us to have our own space and you to have yours so that we can all have time for time out when we need it.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Oh, man, I wish it wasn't so hard to travel with a toddler, but it's good to remember that these are all just phases and stages and nothing is forever. Nothing lasts forever.
That's right. And there are beautiful things with traveling with the toddler, too, that we're making new memories. So I think that doesn't make it less painful, but just remembering that, too.
Absolutely. And it's worth the pain because the more you do it, the better the kids are at traveling and being flexible, like you said. And I would say now, Everett's a really great traveler. Not that we don't have challenging moments, for sure we do. Fortunately, he hasn't been sick recently on our trips, but he will wake up at 4 a.m. and go to the airport. He's like, he knows the drill. And I know LJ too, going back and forth to Maryland all the time. Like, I think it's really worthwhile because by the time they are, little kiddos, they're going to be our little travel buddies.
Absolutely. I loved this, Peeve. I think it's the first time since we sat down in LA to really talk about our feelings just on that experience that we've done it like openly, like publicly like this. So I'm glad that we navigated through that and just highlighted some of the challenges with traveling with the toddler. But then we're not alone in the experience of having some struggles when you're traveling, especially with newer kids and new dynamics.
No, I'm glad we did too, because that was one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast, were to take deep dives into those conversations, that one in particular. But then we just got so excited about talking about other stuff. And this was definitely originally at the top of our list to talk about. So I'm glad that we got to do it today.
Me too.
Thanks everyone for listening to our little trip down memory lane, to our first traveling with a toddler experience, and then reminiscing about a few after. It's never easy, but I feel like it's always worth it.
100%. And I'm sure, well, hopefully something that we shared resonates, or maybe it brought up something else that, reminds you of things that we should be mindful of when we're traveling. But either way, we hope it sparks conversation amongst you and your friend circle. So thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing us to be open and vulnerable. And you know that is a word that I don't use lightly because it's not something that comes naturally to me. So thank you all for creating the space for us to share openly, and for listening to understand and not listening to judge. And I think we all should leave with that with whatever we do in life.
I love that. That's great.
Thank you.
Please do share this episode, any episode that resonates with you or that you think someone else might benefit from hearing. You can find us on Instagram at _is_a_mother_podcast. Engage with us there, please. Leave comments, DM us, whatever floats your boat, however you want to communicate with us. We'd love to connect with you. Let us know what you might want to hear about next. What topic would be good for us to, we have a laundry list of things we want to talk about, but we also want to hear from the community. If there's something that's coming up for you that we might be able to share about, we would love to hear that too.
Love that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Go call your best friend. Love you, Jay.
Love you too, Peeve.
Thank you so much for listening and being part of our conversation and our inner circle.
Follow us on Instagram, _is_a_mother_podcast. And we look forward to you and your best friends joining us next episode.
Leave a rating on this podcast app. It really helps us get our conversations to more friends out there, more friendship circles, and more women and more mothers. And that's what we're here for, to broaden the conversation, to bring everybody into the circle.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Go call your best friend.